3,000 years ago, the most advanced civilization on Earth was terrified of something so small they could not even see it. They built towers just to sleep above it. They wrapped their beds in nets to hide from it. It haunted farmers and priests, slaves and god kings. It left its mark inside the mummy of a pharaoh whose face you would recognize. And after 3,000 years of pyramids, gold, and empire, they never once managed to beat it. This is Chain Reaction Explained, and this is the story of ancient Egypt's oldest and deadliest enemy, a single, silent insect. Everything ancient Egypt was, the farms, the cities, the pyramids, existed because of one thing, the Nile. Every year the river flooded, spread rich black mud across the land and made the desert bloom. Almost the entire population lived crammed into a thin green ribbon along that water. The Nile was life itself. But still, warm, flooded water is also the perfect nursery for mosquitoes. The same river that fed a civilization was breeding, by the millions, the deadliest animal that has ever lived. Life and death flowed side by side in the very same water. The insect was the mosquito, and what it carried was malaria, a tiny parasite it injected straight into the blood with a single bite, bringing waves of burning, shaking fever. How common was it? Thousands of years later, scientists tested the remains of ancient Egyptians and found the DNA of malaria still inside them. In one modern study, about 1 in 5 of the mummies examined had carried the disease. Think about that. Walk through an ancient Egyptian village, and roughly every fifth person you passed might have been fighting this invisible enemy in their blood. It was not a rare tragedy, it was everywhere all the time for thousands of years. So how do you fight an enemy you cannot see, cannot catch, and cannot kill? The Egyptians came up with answers that were thousands of years ahead of their time. The Greek historian Herodotus described 2 of them. People living on higher ground slept up in tall towers because, he wrote, the mosquitoes could not fly that high. And those down in the marshes took their fishing nets, draped them over their beds every single night, and crawled underneath. These were the first mosquito nets in recorded history. And the idea may be far older still. Some accounts trace bed nets all the way back to the pharaoh Sneferu nearly 4,600 years ago. Stop and feel that for a second before the Great Pyramids were even finished. Egyptians were already lying awake in the dark, wrapping themselves in nets, hiding from a hunter they could hear but never see. When the nets failed, and they often did, the Egyptians turned to medicine, and their medicine was, for its time, the most advanced in the world. In a scroll we now call the Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BC, they recorded over 800 remedies, herbs, oils, honey, and spells for every ailment they knew, including the fevers that stalked the river. But here is the tragedy. They were brilliant healers fighting completely blind. They could soothe the fever. They could not stop it because they had no idea a mosquito was the cause. To them, the sickness came from the air, from spirits, from the gods. The real enemy was sitting on their skin the whole time. If the mosquito could take farmers and fishermen, surely the god kings were protected. The most powerful, most guarded people in the world, they were not. In 2010, scientists studied the mummy of the boy king Tutankhamun. Inside him, they found the DNA of malaria, and not just once. The evidence suggested he had been infected again and again with the most dangerous strain of all. Picture it, a living god buried in a tomb of solid gold, worshipped by an entire empire, and still, the same tiny insect that tormented the poorest farmer in the marsh was there in his blood too. Malaria may have been one of the things that helped bring down a pharaoh at only around 18 years old. Now, here's the part that gives me chills. Fast forward almost the entire length of Egyptian history, past 30 dynasties, past the last of the great pharaohs. Legend says that even Cleopatra, the final ruler of ancient Egypt, slept beneath a mosquito net, the most famous queen in history, more than 2,000 years after Sneferu, using the exact same defense against the exact same enemy. In 3,000 years, Egypt had built the pyramids, invented writing and medicine, and ruled the ancient world. And against this one insect, their best weapon was still a net over the bed. Nothing they built ever beat it. So why could not they win? Because you cannot fight what you cannot understand. They never knew the mosquito was the killer, so they could never truly attack it. And even if they had known, they could never abandon the Nile. The river that bred their enemy was the same river that kept them alive. To escape the mosquito, they would have had to give up Egypt itself. So they endured it. For 3,000 years. Today, the pharaohs are dust. Their empire is gone. But the mosquito is still here, still carrying malaria, still one of the deadliest animals on the planet. And yet, something the ancient Egyptians started has never died either. That simple idea, a net over the bed, is now treated with insecticide and handed out across the world, and it saves hundreds of thousands of lives every single year. The pharaohs built monuments to outlast time itself, but maybe their most powerful invention was not made of stone at all. It was a net born out of fear in the dark by the river, 3,000 years ago. So tell me in the comments, if the greatest civilization on Earth could not beat one tiny insect, what does that say about us today? And if this haunted, you know that the mosquitoes' war did not end with the pharaohs. Thousands of years later, it destroyed an army sent by Napoleon himself, and that single disaster handed half of America to the United States. That story is right here. Subscribe to Chain Reaction Explained, because this war is still not finished.